Sandra Bullock, the magnetic muse who first captivated the world with speed and secured an Oscar with The Blind Side, shines among Hollywood's brightest. Yet beneath the glamour of the red carpet lies a series of tragedies so profound no script would dare write them. Her dazzling Oscar moment quickly turned to humiliation when her marriage dissolved in a mere 10 days. In 2014, she was left trembling in a closet, a broken whisper to 911 as an intruder breached her home. And the most devastating blow of all in 2023, the man she called the love of her life, Brian Randall, succumbed to ALS, leaving a hollow space in Sandra that nothing can ever truly fill. Now at 61, a time when she's earned every right to peace after so many victories, Sandra Bullock is forced to live with the heavy weight of loss, the lingering aftershocks of personal disaster, and the relentless judgment of the public. The question that remains is this: what keeps her from shattering? What allows Sandra to stand tall, defined not by her sorrow, but by the quiet resolve of a mother, of a woman who simply endures? In this video, we will journey through both the brilliance and the shadow to see Sandra Bullock, not just as a global movie star, but as a true survivor. On July 26, 1964, in Arlington towards Virginia, within a modest home featuring a worn front porch, Sandra Annette Bullock was born. Her father, John Bullock, was an American military man and vocal coach, a figure who embodied an iron-willed discipline. Her mother, Helga Meyer, was a German opera singer whose voice once commanded grand concert halls across the European continent. Young Sandra's upbringing wasn't marked by poverty, but it was heavily burdened by strict rules and high expectations. Backstage in European theaters, under the golden glow of stage lights reflecting off heavy ball gowns, young Sandra would wait silently by the curtain. While other children were enjoying the laughter of outdoor playgrounds, she was made to memorize every single note, every specific step, integrated into children's choirs, performing the works of Mozart and Bizet. By the tender age of 5, she was already performing on a stage. By 10, she had already resided in more cities than any of her American schoolmates, from the strict corridors of cold schools in Nuremberg and Vienna, to cramped temporary rented rooms where the ceiling would leak, predictably with every rainfall. By 1976, when the family finally returned to America, instead of finding a welcoming home, Sandra felt more isolated than she ever had. Heroon assuming provincial attire from Germany and her distinct accent made her a simple target for ridicule. In the school hallways, the laughter was directed at her, not shared with her. During the recess period, as groups of friends chatted, Sandra would stand alone in a corner, learning how to notice the other forgotten, lonely faces. That profound loneliness swayed the first seeds of empathy within her, a quality that would later become the vital soul of every performance she gave. The family home never lacked a place to sleep, but many nights the entire family was squeezed onto a single bed as they constantly moved between 2 continents. The lingering smell of rain seeping through a cracked, leaky roof. The old familiar suitcases always standing packed for the inevitable next journey. German was a source of comfort. English was a tool for survival. 2 separate identities pulled her in opposite directions, cementing her status as an outsider in both worlds she inhabited. By 1986, Sandra was nearing the completion of her drama degree at East Carolina University. Just a few more credits, and she would possess a stable path, a secure diploma, and a defined future. But New York City issued a powerful call, the undisputed city of theater, of boundless opportunity, and of dreams bought with immense sweat and hardship. She made the decision to drop out, packed a few inexpensive outfits, and threw herself into New York with a passionately burning heart, but a completely empty wallet. The city proved merciless. By day, Sandra aggressively hustled from one audition to the next, often rewarded with nothing but cold curts. By night, she worked tirelessly as a bartender, a waitress, and even as a coat check girl in noisy clubs. Her tiny lower Manhattan apartment had deeply cracked walls and zero working heat, leaving her freezing throughout the winter. Dinner was a dismal rotation of cheap ramen and bitter coffee. Many nights, she would curl up beneath a thin blanket, whispering theater lines to herself while the ceaseless blaring horns of New York traffic echoed outside her window. By the late 1980s, Sandra secured a handful of minor roles in films like Hangman, Religion, Inc., and Who Shot Pacango. But every single one of them faded away quietly, as if their existence had been erased. Movie posters wore out. Reels of films slipped silently into oblivion, leaving behind only a young woman with a fragile-looking dream. Each significant failure left a new scar, and it was from these very scars that her enduring resolve was forged. Then came the year 1993. Demolition Man was released. It wasn't a starring role, but for the first time, Sandra shared the screen with established stars Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. A faint spark was lit, and just 1 year later, that mere spark erupted into an explosion. In 1994, Speed was born. The iconic role of Annie Porter was never initially conceived for her. It had been sent out to much bigger, more famous names. But in her screen test, Sandra sat simply on a folding chair, using a paper plate as her makeshift steering wheel, fully imagining herself driving a runaway bus. No studio polish, no prefabricated glamour, just pure raw authenticity and a pair of fiercely determined eyes. The explosive chemistry between her and co-star Keanu Reeves was so palpable that the whole audition room seemed to catch fire. When Speed went on to gross an astounding $350 million worldwide, the girl who had once subsisted on instant noodles and bitter coffee had become a bona fide star overnight. Those bitterly freezing nights spent beneath a leaking roof. Those years standing completely alone in school corners. The careless, stinging ridicule that once rang through the hallways, all of it gathered and then erupted into a radiant smile on the massive screen. Sandra Bullock had finally stepped out of the shadows and into the dazzling light, carrying with her every ounce of pain and focused determination she had ever known. In 1995, just 1 short year after the success of Speed, Sandra Bullock once again utterly captured the hearts of audiences across the entire globe with While You Were Sleeping. This time, she was no longer the reluctant, stressed bus driver, but the very embodiment of undeniable charm in a romantic comedy. From a struggling waitress in New York with blistered hands, Sandra had now become known throughout America by 2 universally affectionate words: America's sweetheart. In less than a decade, she had converted years of struggle and obscurity and dinners of instant noodles in a cold apartment into a powerful career that forced Hollywood to not only look but to listen. Every single rejection, every tiny forgotten role, all became the essential raw material that forged a star who inherently knew her own powerful worth. Sandra didn't merely survive. She masterfully transformed hardship into an internal fire. But Sandra didn't just stop at the screen. While the world was still preoccupied with calling her America's sweetheart, she was quietly and strategically building her own formidable power. Fortis Films was established as a profound declaration. She was refusing to ever be just a disposable pawn on Hollywood's vast chessboard. Hope floats. Miss Congeniality, 2 Weeks Notice. Each subsequent film carried not only her unmistakable mark as an actress, but also her powerful vision as a producer. Even in the realm of television, she left a lasting imprint, successfully bringing The George Lopez Show into millions of American households. Yet Hollywood always has a cruel way of testing every crown and demanding tribute. Speed, too. Cruise control became her first significant blemish. Without the magnetic presence of Keanu Reeves, and with a fundamentally unconvincing script, the film was brutally rejected by audiences, and Sandra, carrying the lead role, bore the full brunt of the criticism. Later she would laugh, wryly mocking herself. I think only about 5 people liked that movie. But behind that seemingly carefree laugh lay the raw humiliation of someone who had accepted a failure just to secure the chance to produce Hope Floats, a project she believed in with every fiber of her heart. That was Sandra's core essence. Willing to silently bear the ridicule and the mockery as long as she could successfully tell the story she truly believed in. Then in 2010, the spotlight blazed brighter than it ever had. Sandra stood triumphantly on the Oscar stage, firmly clutching the golden statue for her portrayal of Lee Antwi in The Blind Side. The world was celebrating. The press immediately called it the absolute pinnacle of her storied career. Yet just 10 days later, she plummeted into her deepest private abyss. Her marriage to Jesse James brutally collapsed under the heavy weight of betrayal. The greatest professional triumph of her entire life arrived holding hands with her most devastating personal pain. And in the very eye of the storm, Sandra quietly and fiercely shielded her newly adopted son, baby Lewis, from the spreading chaos. That Oscar didn't just honor a single performance. It honored a resilient woman who stood firm in her refusal to allow pain to be her only definition. In the years that followed, Sandra continued to aggressively push every creative boundary. Gravity spectacularly transformed her into an entire universal by herself. Grossing over $700 million worldwide with one of the most lucrative and historic contracts in Hollywood history, Bird Box erupted into home she believed was being lovingly built. But that dream violently collapsed within weeks. Sandra signed the divorce papers with one trembling hand and cradled Lewis to sleep with the other. The woman who had successfully moved audiences worldwide with her portrayal of a mother giving a child a home now had to intensely live that exact role in her own cruel reality, as if fate itself was deliberately playing a cruel, twisted game. Paparazzi immediately camped at her private gates. Headlines screamed of betrayal, but Sandra chose silence. No angry counterattacks, no public bitterness, just a resolute mother rocking her child at night, fiercely shielding him from the escalating storm outside. Later, she would thoughtfully say, "How do you go through pain without letting your child be hurt by it? That's not just philosophy. That's survival." And from that incredible survival, Sandra expertly turned wreckage into profound devotion, betrayal into fierce motherhood. Her true enduring crown was not the glittering Oscar on the shelf, but the quiet, undeniable triumph of a woman who carried both immense glory and devastating heartbreak in the same 10 days and bravely chose to let love write the rest of her story. But fate had not yet finished testing the limits of Sandra Bullock. Sometimes the worst nightmares do not originate from the flashbulbs of intrusive paparazzi or the screaming headlines of tabloids, but appear in the quietest, most vulnerable moments. Right when you finally believe you are safe. On the night of June 8, 2014, after an utterly exhausting day, Sandra returned to her quiet Los Angeles home. Louis was safe with his nanny overnight. The house was dark, utterly still, almost unnervingly peaceful. Then at 1 a.m., that calm shattered instantly. A faint, unfamiliar noise echoed down the hallway, and it was getting closer. She froze, her heart violently pounding in her chest. Someone was actively inside the house. Alone, Sandra quickly locked her bedroom door, hid inside the closet, and urgently dialed 911 with visibly trembling hands. In the terrifying recording of that call, her voice is reduced to barely a broken whisper, the distinct sound of a woman realizing that the walls, the iron gates, all of the protective layers were utterly useless. The house was no longer a refuge. It had been fundamentally violated. The intruder was apprehended that same night. Joshua Corbett, a stranger completely obsessed with Sandra for days, had been leaving notes and dangerously stalking her from the shadows. He possessed an arsenal of firearms. That specific night he hadn't brought them. But the real enduring weapon he successfully left behind was terror. A profound terror that immediately took root in her mind. From that night forward, Sandra was forced to live with invisible scars. Panic attacks could be triggered by the smallest, most innocuous noise. Each time she looked out a car window, her chest tightened with fear. And the most haunting, overwhelming part was not her own personal fear, but the constant worry that Louis would inherit it. Not through blood, but through her own deep, trembling silences. So Sandra bravely sought EMDR therapy, slowly and painstakingly reclaiming pieces of peace, not only for herself but critically also for her son, so that he could successfully grow up in the light, unshadowed by the darkness of her past. Sandra Bullock had bravely survived Hollywood's external storms, but now she was engaged in a fierce, essential battle against the storm within her own soul. And in a profound paradox, that very tragedy eventually opened the door to a new, unexpected chapter. In 2015, at Louis's 50th birthday party, a photographer was specifically hired to take pictures. That man was Brian Randall. In a world where every single eye saw Sandra only as an Oscar-winning star, Brian saw only her, a woman exhausted and unadorned, but also profoundly and wonderfully genuine. From that very moment, a gentle healing connection quietly began. First, it was professional work, then gradually and naturally, as though it had been waiting patiently all along. By the end of that year, Sandra successfully expanded her family by bravely adopting a little girl, Layla. And this time, she was not alone in the journey. Brian, with the natural patient heart of a seasoned father, stepped immediately into their lives as the critical missing piece. He was incredibly patient, tender, and deeply responsible. To Louis and Illa, he was not just their mother's companion, but a father. Theone, who made dinner a true chorus of laughter, who effortlessly turned ordinary daily moments into sparkling, cherished memories. Sandra and Brian never officially married, but to those who